Gather round, my children, and you shall hear the story of, well, not Paul Revere. Okay, so, hello, my name is Sue. I go by the handle Sue Dunhill, and I got that handle actually by rights. Over the years, I've bought and sold more than 100 Dunhill pipes, but that's because that's what I did. But they don't have the same kind of inventory and stuff like we're talking about 20, 30 years ago, so in the meantime, things have changed a lot. I loved Dunhills from the time I was a kid. So here is how I got introduced to smoking. My dad sold briar. So my dad had pipes, and we've always had pipes around the house. My mom's family is from Kentucky. Now, down there in Kentucky, they were a specialty tobacco farm. And what it is they bought and sold seeds and produced certain types of tobacco plants. Along with producing the different types of tobacco plants, they cured those tobacco plants according to special orders and stuff. And I know that doesn't seem like a big deal now, but some of those that they cured up to 15 and 17 years ago are just now coming into circulation. And that's kind of neat to know that from these farms, and also from the Harris farms. I believe, Ed, aren't some of your farms still producing tobacco? I have a Duke Ed in North Carolina, and his family was big in tobacco, real big in tobacco. As a matter of fact, they had so much tobacco and property and stuff that hospitals were named after his granddad and stuff. So anyway, so that's how I kind of grew up. But here's how I got my first pipes. We had already been traveling with my mom and dad some anyway by then, but because my dad traveled all over the world and my mom used to travel with him, and us girls got to go. So that was really a wonderful life for, young kids to get to go to all these different countries. You didn't need to speak the language in any of those countries when you're children, because children have a language of their own. And I can honestly say, through all the countries and all the traveling we did, I don't believe that there was ever a time when, because we got to stay with the help, we got to stay with the kids, that it wasn't, it was always so much fun. Because sooner or later you figured out what the other one wanted, and everybody got in trouble together. But, so I was 4 years old. Gray's age. I was 4 years old, and I was always following my dad around. I had 2 sisters. They were my dad's favorites. You just ask them. Both of them knew that they were my dad's favorite, although I really was. So I would follow my dad around, and I would always want to do what he wanted to do and stuff. And my 2 sisters were a little bit more foo-foo. I was too, but not like them. I was the tomboy. So I'd follow my dad around, and my dad would light up a pipe and stuff like that. Well, one day, I took my bubble pipe, and I decided I was going to pack it with some tobacco. And he had these jars of tobacco up there, and I couldn't decide what jar I wanted to pack with tobacco, and I'd seen him before get some out of more than one. So I took my bubble pipe, and I dipped it into those jars of tobacco. I got found out. And you would think that when something like that happened, and you got to realize, I ruined those jars of tobacco by putting that bubble pipe in there. I didn't know it had liquid in it. You don't know that things as a kid, not a 4-year-old. But instead of getting mad at me, my dad took and said, if you're going to do it, you're going to do it right. And he took me to Katz. Remember the store Katz? Some of you might not. He took me to Katz. Katz. To their tobacco section. And he also had some friends that had tobacco stores, good tobacco stores and stuff. So he could have taken me anywhere. But he took me to Katz. And the reason he took me to Katz is because they must have had in my days and in my 4-year-old eyes, millions of pipes. But really, it wasn't probably that many. But when you get a young kid and you say, okay, you can pick out any pipe you want. There was I realized most of them were medicos and stuff, but he said, you can pick out any pipe you want. Well, I went to the good case and I wanted the Dunhill. But instead, he bought me, he did buy me a Dunhill later on from a friend of ours named JJ, John Jackson. He had a shop. He did buy me a Dunhill that same year. He bought me a little Farmers, we call it a Farmers, a little round apple, a number 2, and it's set up on the shelf. And he told me when I was old enough that I could smoke that pipe. But in the meantime, I got my Medico pipe, the prettiest pipe in the world. I mean, it was so beautiful. I broke about 4 of them. But when you're 4, you're not as careful as you should be. But that's okay, because my dad would get me another one. And he got me some pouches of Blackjack or Captain Black and something else that was in a pouch. And he told me I could play with those and I could load and unload my pipe, but I couldn't get any on the floor. I couldn't take it out of the house or out of where he was at. I always had to be around him or at home. And I couldn't share. And I couldn't light it. And I think to give a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old those kind of instructions, we're going to cheat. And I did a couple of times, but it was not with the kind of, it was no good. So you're a 4-year-old, you don't do things like you're supposed to. I did have an older sister that helped. But anyway, so that was my first Dunhill. I was 4 years old. My dad enrolled me in the White Spot Society or Fellowship. I'll have to look it up because I still am a member of that. So I have been there since before 1960. Before 1950. Shit. I've been part of this white from the time they started probably. Anyway, so, every year my dad at Christmas time would say, what do you want? And I always said I wanted another Dunhill. So by the time I was 18, I had 14 Dunhills. My dad had bought me a Dunhill every year for my birthday, which was already a pretty neat deal. I think I was probably a little bit of a snob by the time I actually started smoking, and I thought that the only pipe you were supposed to smoke was Dunhill. And it took me 4 or 5 years after I started smoking, to get out of that. But you got to remember, my dad sold briar, so we got to travel all over the world collecting briar and all over the world selling briar. There again, when people think about selling to the Dunhills, or doing something with the Dunhill factory, they're thinking in terms of you go in there and into the Dunhill castles and big mansions and stuff. No. We were the help. We were a salesman trying to get them to buy some stock and some future briar stock. So we stayed with, I think his name was Chamberlain. I'll have to look it up because I might or might not have some records of it. We were so young then. Anyway, we stayed with him, and he was actually one of the guys that was on the floor that did the, I think, testing in order to see if the briar would be bought by Dunhill. Because that's what my dad did. My dad would go out in the field and take samples of the briar. I'm assuming that there was machinery that we carried around. I'm not really sure how it got done. I just know that he took the briar, it went into machineries. They dried it out, they oiled it, they pressured it, they burned it, they did all kinds of things to it in order to put a value upon what that future was going to be. That's a whole nother lecture. What the real story was just about is that when I was 4 years old, I got to get my first pipe. Now, later on in the years, my dad started showing me how to pack the pipe, so I always got to sit in the front seat because my mom didn't like getting her hands dirty when we were on vacation and stuff. And so in a way, it kind of, me being I taught my cousins how to smoke a pipe. They were farmers, like everybody else was. and they were trying to smoke undried tobacco, or not dried enough tobacco, in a wet cob. I mean, I showed them how to do it right, and all I got was in trouble for it. Of course, I was only 13 or 12, and so were they, but that's how I start with my tobacco smoking, or my first pipe. And but then the stories go on since that. Next story will be how my dad monster-proofed us. My dad used to monster-proof us, and honest to God, I was never and never have been attacked. I'm in my 70s, and I have never been attacked by a monster. My dad did a good job.